Good morning, everybody. So today we'll talk about quantum computers. Okay. Before moving on to quantum computers, so we are using what is called. We are using what is called as a classical computer, right? So how have we built this classical computer? So the basis for building this classical computer is by using electronic circuits, right? So these are built using electronic circuits. So what do these circuits have? These circuits have some wires and some logical gates. Simplified it a bit. Okay. So basics are this wires and logical bits. And what is uh, the states that are or the foundation on which this entire computation is built? So how information is stored in the computer? We store information in the computer using a concept called as bit, and this bit, a binary digit, right, can be in 0 or 1 state. This is the fundamental concept of classical computers. So how is quantum computers different from this? Is what we are going to say. So classical computer bit will have 0 and value, but quantum bit, and this is in short is also called as a qubit. So to represent qubit, we use this terminology. Okay. So this is a mathematic description of qubit. So if these are states for classical computers, for quantum computers, that is qubits, so we can say states are this and this. Here you can see, no? So these are the states. This is the notation that we use. But you should also remember that unlike classical computers, which can always be only in one of those two states, quantum computer can be in more than these two states. Okay, so qubit can be other than these two. Okay, other than this and this, right? A qubit can be in infinite number of states. That's where this alpha and beta will come into picture. Okay, so why it can mean that many number of states is because alpha and beta, whatever we have represented, these are complex numbers, okay, such that we are using alpha square plus beta square is equal to 1. We are talking about the complex space. Okay, so this is in the complex space. So here 0 and 1 are called as basis states. Alright, so whatever we wrote this, no, 0 and 1 are called as basis states. Okay, and this one psi is called superposition. 0 and 1 are called as basis states and psi is called as superposition. right? And quantum state is represented using this. I hope this is clear. See, in classical sense, we can observe that it is 0 or 1. That's why it is called as a basis state. Okay. I am repeating, in classical case, we can observe it as 0 and 1. But we cannot determine the quantum state just by observation. If you measure qubit, when you measure the qubit, you can get a state 0 with the probability of alpha square. Remember this, right? And when you measure this state, okay, you might get 1 with the probability of beta square. Okay, I know it's very difficult for us to visualize this using our classical thinking, but this is the source of that power which is there for quantum computers. So not only single qubit, whatever we represented now as a single qubit representation, we can also define multiple qubits here in quantum computers. So how can I define a multiple qubit? So let's say we have 4 computational basis states, okay? Means if we are using a 2 qubit system, let's say if you are using a 2 qubit system, it will have 4 computational states, which will be that 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0 and 1, 1, right? So here we can write it as 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0 and 1, 1. And how can I represent the quantum state for this? Psi, right? So we can represent it like this. Since you have 0, 0, let's write alpha 0, 0 and alpha 0, 1. Or you can write alpha, beta, gamma, etc. But it will become large, right? So we'll write it like this. Alpha 1, 0 and alpha 1, 1. Okay. Now what is, in the previous case when you had just 2 bit, we wrote alpha square plus beta square is equal to 1. Here all the 4 will be put together. That is alpha 0, 0 square plus alpha 0, 1 square plus alpha 1, 0 square plus alpha 1, 1 square. This is in total is going to be 1. So I hope you understood how to represent qubit. What do we mean by the basis states? How can I generate a quantum state over here like this? So when you measure now this, your measurement by observation, you can see 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0 or 1, 1. The probability that you will get this state to be in 0, 0 is alpha 0, 0 square. The probability that when you compute a quantum state that it will be 0, 1 is by the probability of alpha 0, 1 square. Okay, and so on. So now we understood what do we mean by quantum bit, quantum state, basis, right? And how we derive, what do we mean by basis states and what is the actual quantum state. Initially, you remember when I defined a classical computer, I said it's made up of wires and gates. So there gates, when you use a NOT gate, in regular sense, 0 will become a 1. So how does this work in a quantum computer? Right? So to generate a quantum computer, you need to derive quantum gates. So let's just see an example of NOT gate and NOR gate. Okay. Excuse me. just NOT gate and NOR gate. And because we have complex vector space here, alpha square plus beta square is equal to 1. So how can I represent a qubit NOT gate? Okay. So we can say we can represent it using, this is linear on two-dimensional complex vector space. Okay, so let's say alpha and beta, we need two values, isn't it? So ultimately I want the result to be reversed. It should be beta and alpha, isn't it? This is what I want. So how will you derive beta alpha from alpha beta? You have to multiply that alpha beta with something. So what is that something? You can use a unitary matrix, right? So if you write a unitary matrix, what do we mean by a unitary matrix? So if you have a matrix, let's say A, when you do A into adjacency of A, then I get an identity. Then we call this as a unitary matrix. Okay. So basically what is the meaning of this? You see 0 plus, when you multiply this, it becomes 0 into alpha, 1 plus beta. So it becomes beta, right? It's a 0 plus beta. Similarly, 1 into alpha plus 0 plus beta will make it as alpha plus 0, and that's how you got this. I hope this is clear. So this is qubit NOT gate. Next let us see NOR gate, quantum NOR gate. Okay. So how we can represent a quantum NOR gate? We can represent it as a AB. So A comma B XOR A. Okay. This is how we can represent a quantum NOR gate. Okay. So now, what is this? We know that this is nothing but a mod 2 operation, right? It is addition mod 2 operation. So what is the quantum basis for this NOR operation? So NOR 0 remains 0, correct? And 0 1 is going to remain as a 0 1. 1 0, however, will change to 1 1, and 1 1 will change to 1 0. Okay. See, 0 0 0 1 will remain as it is. If it's 1 0, it becomes 1 1, and 1 1 will become 1 0. So you're just inverting the bit here for NOR bit. So how can I describe it? So as we saw here, we need a unitary matrix. That's all, isn't it? So describe a unitary matrix for this. Very simple. To describe a unitary matrix, the first one remains as it is. The second one also remains as it is. But the third state and the fourth state will invert, isn't it? So since they invert, I'm not going to write 1 here, I'm going to write 1 here, and I'm going to write a 1 here instead of the fourth place. Okay, so this is gate. So how can now we have understood what do we mean by a qubit states, and we have also learned how to design the quantum gates. So we can define a quantum computer now. What is a quantum computer? So we can say a quantum computer is a computer, or we can also call it as a system built using quantum circuits, right? Built from quantum circuits. What will these circuits contain? They contain wires like your regular computer containing, and instead of regular gates what we are going to write here, it also has some elementary quantum gates, right? And what do they do? They manipulate, right? Or they work on the quantum information. So, to carry out, why that system is built? It is built to carry out manipulation of information. All computers are manipulation of information, but here the information is quantum information. Okay. So I hope this is clear. What is a quantum computer? A little bit. It finds a lot of, it will find a lot of applications. It's believed to reduce the computer size a lot and do things extremely fast, large calculations, etc. So basically, we said that whether P and NP can be equated. Initially, it was assumed that it can never be equated. Then there was an open question to see if you can have any problems which can be solved similarly using both P and NP classes solutions. Okay, and it's believed that this could be proved in future. So far, nobody has proved it. It is possible to prove something like this using the quantum computers. Okay, and they assume that it's going to take another 30-40 years to build this computer, so I won't be alive, maybe you'll be alive to see those computers working extremely efficiently, extremely fast. Huge number of data can be processed very fast, etc. The last topic in this chapter is Church Turing thesis. We started this model with this only, you remember, before we, I think previous module, when we started studying about the Turing machines, we talked about Church Turing thesis. Okay. So, what did we say in the Church Turing thesis initially when we started studying? That is, we said that Church Turing thesis asserts that any algorithm that can be performed on any computing machine can be performed on a Turing machine, right? If there is an algorithm that can be implemented in a computer, that means we can come out with a method to solve the same problem using the Turing machine. Keep this in mind. Next, how computers became so powerful is because the chips that were used to build the computers started becoming small and small, right? So we can call it as miniaturization. So what did miniaturization of chips do? It increased the power of computers, right? You can put more in small space. So, right. And there is something called as Moore's law. Moore's law describes the growth rate of computer power. Okay. Remember, there is something called as a Moore's law. You may have studied this. And Moore's law is used now in classical sense, okay, to uh, describe computational power. Okay. So, growth of computational power. So, what did the Moore's law say? The Moore's law said that computational power will double for constant cost every 2 years. Okay, so what did he say? Computational power doubles for constant price or cost every 2 years. What is the meaning of this? Whatever you get today for 40,000 rupees, let's say after 2 years, for 40,000 rupees, you will get more powerful computer. Okay, but initially this was true, but now it's not so. Like when I bought a computer for 60,000 rupees, in 98, I'm telling you, for 60,000 rupees, my computer had highest hard disk capacity of 1 GB, okay, or 2 GB. Now you carry a pen drive, which is, um, I don't think so you get even 1 GB pen drive anymore. But I'm talking about 128 GB pen drives will buy for 1,000 rupees. This is clear to you. So that's how that, for lesser cost you are getting more value out of it. But of course, the growth was true. Whatever he said was true initially. But after that, now it looks as if, we have reached the limit. That is doubling power. Whatever information he said in 2 or 3 decades. Now, this, whatever he says that at a constant cost, power doubles every 2 years. This is not becoming true anymore. Okay. So now what happens is we have to put efforts to make this, true. We do not want to make this Moore's law go false. So to put effort to build computers, which are smaller and smaller, but which are computationally larger and which are also less expensive. So to do this, quantum computers are coming into picture. In between, there was a group of people who said instead of using the digital computers, if we use analog computers, we can solve the problems more efficiently than the Turing machine solutions. But analog computers means there's a lot of noise involved over there. So the power of those analog computers were, uh, they didn't remain interesting anymore. But for some time, let's say in 1970s, this time the decade when I was born, people started using non-deterministic Turing machines also efficiently. Not just deterministic Turing machines, people started using non-deterministic Turing machine also efficiently, leading to strengthening of this Church-Turing thesis. But as I said, ultimately our discussion is going towards to, make all this is true and keep it true. What we have to do is, you have to prove that quantum computers are more efficient than Turing machines. And it did happen because somebody, found an algorithm to find prime factors of the composite numbers. Finding the prime factor of the composite number is a large problem, huge problem, but they did find it out, and they did find it out in a quantum computer, or they proved that it can be done in a quantum computer. Okay, so with this, I'll stop today's class and we'll continue in the next class.